Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and this message is a message to the members of the Libertarian Party. A couple of days ago, the Libertarian Party hierarchy announced a fundraising scheme relating to the National Convention this coming May. The scheme said that any of the presidential candidates, the top 5 presidential candidates who raise the most money for the Libertarian Party, will be permitted to participate in the presidential debate at the National Convention in May, and everyone else will be excluded. And the idea, of course, is to raise money for the National Party. When I learned about this scheme, I immediately sent an email to Angela McArdle, the chairman of the National Party, and to every member of the LNC, pointing out that I had not been asked and I had not given my consent to use my name and my photograph in this scheme. What they do is what they have is a page where everybody's picture, the candidates' pictures are there, and then people are expected to click on the picture that they want to support and then make a donation. But the donation does not go to the candidate. The donation goes to the party. And so I said, remove me from this immediately. I have no wish to participate in this scheme. I'm fully aware of the consequences, but it doesn't matter. There is just no possibility that I will participate in this fundraising scheme. Now, before I give you the full context of this whole thing, let me point out preliminarily why this is such an odious scheme. Okay, they're having deep financial problems there in the party, which means that not enough people want to donate. They don't want to support the party. And instead of doing the soul searching that should be going into this, of saying, why don't people want to support us? The same soul searching that I've been arguing about in the debates that I've been attending and participating in. We're at 0% in the polls, and I'm saying, when you're at 0%, that's the time to do some soul searching. Ask why are voters rejecting our message? The same thing with donations. I mean, this is how businesses operate in the market economy. When consumers are not patronizing their business, that's time for soul searching and saying, hey, we got to figure out what's going on here. But rather than do that, they have resorted to really a highly manipulative type fundraising scheme here. This is what they're essentially doing. They're telling donors, we understand that you don't want to donate to what we're doing here and what we've been doing, but if you want to support your candidate and get him into the debate and give him a better chance to win the nomination, then you're going to have to support us with a donation, whether you like it or not. Because by voting for your candidate, the money comes to us. That's odious to me. I mean, it's just manipulative. If people don't want to donate and you've got to manipulate them into doing this through this little trickery, that's not a good sign at all. And one of the long-term consequences of this, nobody likes getting manipulated. And so when people are writing out checks to the Libertarian Party regime here that don't want to, but they want to support their candidate, you think they're going to forget that? Not a chance. I mean, this may be a short-term fix, but as soon as this election's over the next 4 years, I'm pretty confident those people that knew they were manipulated into making these donations are not going to be making donations. So it's just a short-term fix, and it doesn't get to the root of the problem. And that is, why is it that people don't want to donate? Here's another preliminary factor before I give you the overall context. They're turning the presidential candidates into fundraisers, like professional fundraisers for the party. That's not what a candidate's supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be out there campaigning and showing the delegates and the members of the party which candidate would be best able to represent the party and present the party's genuine views to the American electorate in a competent way. And instead, they've got the candidates on the phone getting money. Hey, John, I need you to make a donation. No, I know you've already made a donation to my campaign. This is a donation to the party. Oh, yeah, I'm raising money for the party now. I mean, that is not the job of a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. That's the job of their fundraisers, who obviously have not been doing a real good job. But it's not, I don't want to suggest that it's the fundraisers' problem. It's the party's problem. And that's the larger context I want to talk to you about. There's a reason why this is going on. And this is what the regime, that has been running the party for the last 3 years does not want to confront. They don't want to confront the distinct possibility that donors are right not to be donating here. Okay, and as I've argued in these debates, I think it's going to, at the end of this thing, I think it's 21 debates, and I've been saying there's a reason why we're at 0%. Okay, we got 1% 3 years ago, more or less, and then this time around we're at 0%. There's actually a zero. And my argument is that if voter sentiment has not improved over the last 3 years, it's not going to improve over the next 6 or 7 months. Why would it? And voters are telling us something here. We need to listen to this. And what they're telling us, they don't like our message. And that's why I keep saying that if you like the 1 or 2%, 0%, fine, okay, no problem. But if you want a higher breakout, like 10 to 15%, you got to change directions. And if you want donations to come in, if you want a surge of support in this party, you got to change your message. And I've been saying this for 3 years, but the reset regime has not listened. Now let me put this in the overall context. And I want to encourage everybody, you do what you want. You know, if you all believe in supporting the party, by all means you do it. Everybody's got to follow his own conscience. But I want to explain why I don't want to be part of this scheme, this fundraising scheme. Not only because I think it's odious in terms of its manipulation, but I myself do not want to support them with a donation. I don't like the direction they've taken this party over the last 3 years. And so they think they're putting me in a position to where, yuck, yuck, Jacob's going to have to support us whether he likes it or not to get into this debate and have a better chance of winning the nomination. And yuck, yuck, he's going to have to get his supporters to donate to us too. Yuck, yuck. They don't know me. They still don't know me. That's not going to happen. And if I don't make the debate and I don't win the nomination, so be it. But I am not going to ask somebody else to do something that I am not willing to do. That doesn't sit well with me. If I'm not going to donate, I'm not going to ask anybody else to donate. In fact, in my letter to Angela McArdle, I said, please refund any money that has been made on my behalf and has been done without my consent by the party. They didn't even ask me if they could include my name and photograph in this contest. So here's what's the overall context of this. At the Reno Reset Convention, I was really excited. I mean, I thought, man, this takeover is going to restore the libertarian brand of principle libertarianism, that this is really going to be the party of principle, which it hasn't been. I mean, it's been advocating positions that violate the core principle of libertarianism for at least 20 years now. The non-aggression principle, not to mention the pledge that we all sign, which is kind of treated as a joke in terms of a lot of these positions. But I had my hopes up. Before the convention, I even bought a lifetime membership. That's how enthusiastic I was about where the party I thought was going. And I don't know how much it cost, $1,500 or something like that. So it helped out the party a little bit. I mean, I know it's a drop in the bucket in the overall scheme of things, but every little bit helps. So right after the Reset Convention in Reno, right out the chute, the party hierarchy recruits 2 Republicans for State House, candidates for State House, to come over to the Libertarian Party and change their party designation to Libertarian Party. And I'm like, what? That's not possible. And because you see, in their minds, a Republican is just like a Libertarian. And one of them even wrote me and said, oh, we vetted them both. And they're both Libertarian. We determined they're both Libertarian. Are you kidding me? At least one, I think maybe 2, but at least one was a super Trumpista. I mean, like a MAGA person to the max. Big supporter of Donald Trump. But you see, even Donald Trump was considered libertarian by many libertarians. Oh, he's a libertarian, Jacob, he's a libertarian. There were a lot of libertarians supporting Donald Trump in the 2016 election and the 2020 election because he's a libertarian. Well, you see, but that shows you what's happened to the party. This is my lament about this party. For 20 years, we've been running a message of Republican light, Republican positions, serfdom reform, okay, reforming the serfdom way of life under which we live, and libertarian socialism, supporting libertarian socialist programs like Social Security, Medicare, public schooling, school vouchers, immigration controls. which are a combination of all three factors. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not a good sign at all. Well, then they invite me. The LNC has a fundraising event in a hotel in Arlington, Virginia. Maybe it's been Alexandria, I'm not sure. And I get invited to this, and I'm told that this is major donors to the party. So I go to this thing, and all of a sudden, they introduce the featured speaker at this event. And the featured speaker is a guy named Corey DeAngelis, who is the premier school voucher proponent in the country. And he gives a talk there advocating school vouchers. And I'm sitting there saying, oh my gosh, I'm dumbfounded. I'm just dumbfounded. How can this be at a fundraising event? They're calling for supporting school vouchers. But you see, school vouchers had become a mainstay of the party for the last 20 years. They were imported from the Republican Party. It's kind of like a regular thing. But I figured with the Reno reset, everything was going to change. We were going to restore the libertarian brand of principled libertarianism. We were going to be advocating only freedom positions. Here we are advocating what is really a premier socialist reform measure. And that's what it is. It's a socialist reform measure. It takes money from one group of people through the initiation of force, taxation, and gives it to another group of people to help fund their children's education in some private school, which is now under the control of the government because it's receiving these school vouchers. And then it's also justified under the notion that we're going to improve the public school system, which is really better named the government school system, which is a massive socialist program at the local level and the state level. You've got socialism central planning at the state or local level. You've got compulsory attendance laws that mandate attendance. You've got the state determining the curricula and school and the textbooks. The school teachers are approved by the state. They work for the state. The funding is through the coercive apparatus of taxation. You couldn't find a better model of socialism than public schooling. And then look what they teach, regimentation, deference to authority, obedience to orders. I've often said that it's Army light. It's like going to boot camp for 18 years of your life. And the idea is they're going to mold people into being good little citizens that don't question anything. And they're very successful in that. My favorite quote is Johann Goethe saying, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Because it captures the plight of the American people, and primarily because of the molding of their minds that took place in public schooling, that all this welfare warfare statism is freedom. And so here's this guy at this LNC event advocating this socialist program as part of a fundraising event, but he's also advocating a violation of the core principle of the libertarian philosophy, the non-aggression principle, because school vouchers are based on the initiation of force. And it's also violating the pledge that we all signed, which, the attitude, I think, is like, well, Jacob, don't worry about the pledge. The pledge doesn't matter. Well, I do worry about the pledge. It's a vow. It's a pledge. If the party's not going to honor it, then it ought to be thrown away. But to keep it, that's problematic when you know you're going to be violating it and you're going to be having fundraising events that call for the violation of the pledge. So that didn't bode well for me. I'm like saying, oh my gosh, this is not what I signed up for. And soon after that, I get a fundraising letter from the National Party hierarchy that's advocating vouchers. and they're saying, send your money into the party so we can promote this program, this socialist program. They didn't use these words, but that's the thrust of it, to promote this socialist program that violates the core principle of libertarianism and that violates the pledge that y'all took. Just ignore that pledge and send your donations in. Well, needless to say, I'm not going to donate to something like that. I take a pledge very seriously. I take the non-aggression principle very seriously. And I think that if you're going to call yourself the Party of Principle, which they do, they call it the Party of Principle TM. Go to the website, it's Party of Principle TM. And I can only assume that the TM means trademark, that they've trademarked it. They don't want any other party to call itself the Party of Principle. They want to be the only ones. But it seems to me that if you're going to call yourself the party of principle TM, you ought to adhere to the principles TM, okay? I mean, when you're out there asking people to donate to you to help you promote a program that violates the core principle of libertarianism and the pledge everybody takes, that's a serious problem as far as I'm concerned. All right, well, so just recently, I get another fundraising letter saying, help us get libertarians elected to school boards. Oh my gosh, school boards. In other words, they're and it's not unusual. All of my opponents in this race, say, oh, libertarians ought to be, getting on school boards to run the public school system. It's been the message we've been putting out for 20 years. It's what I object to, along with the other parts of this three-factor thing of libertarian socialism, serfdom reform, and Republican light. You've got, of course, immigration controls, Social Security and Medicare, health savings accounts, school vouchers, public schooling, regulatory reform, drug war reform, reform, monetary reform. It's just a bad message for the party. But here is this fundraising letter saying, send your money in so we can get libertarians to take control of socialism so that we can run these socialist programs rather than Democrats and Republicans. Is that what this party's come to? Is that what it's all about? Getting libertarians out there to run socialism? I mean, instead of a fundraising letter says, we want to make the case for separating school and state. Will you help us? Will you send a donation in? Now you got my attention. But to send your money in to support socialism and a violation of our core principles, that's not what I signed up. And so, needless to say, I've been really disappointed with the reset regime. Now, in this campaign, we're 0% in the polls, okay? And at every convention I said, we got to do some soul searching here. Yeah, we can run the same kind of campaign we've been running for 20 years. If you go back to the early debates here, you'll see most of my opponents vociferously calling for the continuation of Social Security and Medicare. These are the crown jewels of American socialism. They're based on the initiation of force, and it's been ingrained in party members for 20 years that this shows care and compassion on the part of the Libertarian Party. This is pure nonsense. I just got an email from a guy, or no, he posted it on my YouTube site. He said, Jacob, I can't support you because you're just heartless, that you don't want to support Social Security and Medicare. Are you kidding me? See, this is the mindset that's been ingrained in Americans, including libertarians, that they're showing care and compassion, including my opponents for this nomination. They honestly convince themselves that they're showing care and compassion by continuing this program. They call it an off-ramp, or they call it a tax rebate scheme or whatever. But where the government's taking money from one group of people through the initiation of force and giving it to another group of people. Because there's no fund. There never has been a fund. There's no contract, never has been. It's a straight welfare state program. It's a straight socialist program, just like food stamps and public housing. And when at the South Carolina debate that you can see on my campaign website at jacobforliberty.com, they were vociferous, most of my opponents. I mean, it was like, we've got to continue this program for the next generation, at least 25 years. And, with this complex opt-out plan where young people are going to be forced to have their money invested in a government-approved retirement account, and of course still taxing young people, because who else is going to be paying the money to fund the seniors on Social Security today? But it's this mindset that, oh, they're showing care and compassion. How do you show care and compassion through the initiation of force, through a coercive apparatus known as the IRS, one of the most tyrannical agencies in U.S. history? Okay? But that's what they've done to people's mindsets. And that, oh, people will be dying in the streets. That's what they also said at the South Carolina debate. That I was heartless because there'd be people dying in the streets. Pure nonsense. Americans lived without socialism for more than 100 years. And not only was there this tremendous prosperity because there wasn't the taxes to fund this giant monstrosity, but there was also the greatest outburst of voluntary charity that mankind has ever seen. And that's the only genuine charity there is. The one that comes from the willing heart of the individual. It's always easy to be good, caring, and compassionate with stolen money that the state has stolen from people through taxation and the IRS. But don't tell me that somebody's being caring and compassionate by wanting to continue this program. Uh, Genuine charity is children and grandchildren helping parents and grandparents on a voluntary basis. The churches of America are filled with people, faith-filled people that are always ready to help out others. Charitable groups, neighborhood groups. We've got to lead America in the restoration of these values. And the only ones that can do that are libertarians. And if we go down the Republican path or the Democrat path, with saving Social Security for 25 years and keeping Medicare indefinitely. That's another thing that the message has been from this party. Oh, we're going to keep Medicare and Medicaid, but we're going to advocate health savings accounts or something called direct medical care or some other reform. There is no reform that will ever work. The root cause of this healthcare crisis is Medicare and Medicaid. They never should have been enacted. And the only way to resolve it and get healthcare prices back to low, normal, stable is get rid of these massive socialist programs. So now, periodically I'm attacked by saying, oh, Jacob, you're just showing that you're more libertarian, you're more principled. And that's a standard attack from the reform wing of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement. 3 years ago when I sought this party's nomination, I didn't make the South Carolina debate because I had not announced in time. But I sat in and watched it, and Matt Welch from Reason Magazine was the moderator, and one of the first questions he asked was, what do you do about Medicare? And every one of the candidates there gave the standard message. It has become, inherent to the party, the message that I object to. We need to reform it, health savings accounts or some other kind of reform. And so I came back to my house and I said, I posted an article on my campaign website saying, well, I just want all the party members to know what I would have said had I been in that debate. It seemed to me that was a fair thing to do. If I'd been in the debate, this is how I would have answered. And I said, I would have said repeal immediately without any hesitation. And I explained why. That the socialist program had destroyed what had been the finest healthcare system in history. When I was growing up, there was no Medicare and Medicaid, and prices were low. Nobody had major medical insurance because they didn't need it. Going to the doctors was like going to the grocery store, at least the grocery store before all the inflation hit that sector. And doctors handled free poor people on a voluntary basis. It was a wonderful system. Medicare and Medicaid come in and they destroy all that. And well, immediately Matt Welch from Reason goes on the attack and writes an article. Jacob's just trying to show he's more principled, more libertarian, which is pure nonsense. I never said that. I never intended to say that. What I was simply saying is, if you want freedom and you want a sound healthcare system, you got to get government out of the healthcare business. You got to separate healthcare and the state. But you see that the reform wing gets offended by that because they can't go that far. They're willing to settle for serfdom reform. One of the three factors that I mentioned that has become our message. And I even had one of my main supporters though call me immediately and say, oh, you have to take that article down. You can't win the nomination of this party if you're advocating the repeal of Social Security and Medicare. That Libertarian Party members are deeply committed to these two programs, and you can't win the nomination. And I said, what? I said, these are socialist programs. Doesn't matter. You can't win. Well, needless to say, I didn't take them down. I also didn't win the nomination either, though, just so you'll know. But what I'm saying is that when a party loses its way, look at immigration controls. Another classic example. I mean, the party has moved in the right-wing direction, the Republican direction on immigration controls, favoring immigration controls in some fashion or another. Seal the border, militarize the border, have the immigration control system, but let in more immigrants, all of which comes with a massive police state. And some of them even argue this is libertarianism, Jacob. Let me tell you something. If you see a program that brings death, suffering, perpetual crisis, 80 years of crisis, chaos, refugee camps, detention centers, and a massive police state involving highway checkpoints, warrantless searches, and the rest of the police state, that's a 100% sure sign that is not a libertarian position. Okay, because if libertarianism was a philosophy of death, suffering, and a police state, I would have nothing to do with it. I'd walk away from it. But libertarianism is a glorious philosophy of life and vitality and energy and pursuit of happiness and liberty and privacy. And it's a wonderful philosophy, which means open borders, the free market, When you cross a border, you're not violating anybody's rights. You're just peacefully crossing an artificial line. So this movement toward the Republican Party is a disaster, but they say, oh, well, it'll garner a lot of votes for us, Jacob. Really? Well, how come we got only 1.1% 3 years ago? How come we're at 0% if it's so popular? Because voters clearly are assuming we're going to send the same kind of candidate we've run for 20 years. And why is that? Well, because every single right-wing proponent of immigration controls is going to vote for Donald Trump. They're not going to waste their vote on an LP candidate that favors immigration controls. It'd be stupid to waste their vote. And it would be a wasted vote. Trump's going to be saying, I need every vote I can to stop the steal this time around. We need to flood the ballot boxes. Well, my position of open borders is totally different, because there's millions of migrant families across this America that are horrified by what's been going on the border for 80 years. Those are our voters. I've been saying at convention after convention, this is the greatest opportunity in the history of this party. And it may never come again. Okay? You may get to your deathbed and say, that friggin' Jacob Hornberger was right. That opportunity came only one time and we let it pass by. But there's millions of people across this country that are horrified, that are just looking for leadership and an alternative. And that alternative is open borders. And I've been passing around a flyer at these conventions with 4 books on them to show people this is not pie in the sky esoteric. There's my book that I co-edited with Richard Ebeling, The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration, a brand new book, fantastic book called The Case for Open Borders by John Washington, a journalist from Tucson. There's Open Borders by Brian Kaplan, the brilliant economics professor at George Mason University. And then the 4th one is Let Them In, The Case for Open Borders by Jason Riley, a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. We go and make that case to this large sector of people. Those are our voters. But they will not vote for my opponents. They will not vote for this 20-year message that's been going on in this party minimum of supporting the Republican position or Republican-like position of immigration controls. They will only vote for a libertarian candidate who is making the competent case, the religious case, the moral case, the economic case for open borders. But you see, at the Colorado Libertarian Party convention, we were asked a very interesting question. What is your explanation for this morass in the party? And, well, a blind man can see it. It's a rudderless ship. That's what I told the convention there in Colorado. It's a rudderless ship. That's what the Libertarian Party is. It's a ship without a rudder. And you know what happens with a ship without a rudder. It just starts meandering left to right, left to right. It has no direction. I mean, look, just a year ago, there were people in the party saying, oh, we need a savior, we need a savior. Vivek Ramaswamy Ramaswamy, he's a libertarian, Jacob, he's a libertarian. Ron DeSantis, Jacob, he favors immigration controls. He could bring in all these votes, you know. I mean, it's like, I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, you know. I mean, but you see, the idea is they can get votes, Jacob, so it's okay. Doesn't matter if their positions violate every libertarian principles there is. We'll just redefine them as libertarian. And then now, what's fascinating is the rudderless ship is now moving left. And now that there's this flirtation political dance with Robert Kennedy Jr., including among leaders of this party. It's just absolutely fascinating. This guy is a big government, welfare state-loving, gun-grabbing Democrat who praises communist Cuba's healthcare system and communist China's public works projects, and calls himself anti-war while he adheres to unconditional military and financial support to the Israeli government. I mean, to me, it's incredible that there's actually people saying, oh, Kennedy should come into the party and save us, Jacob, save us. And by save us, they're referring to that he will get votes. He will get votes. But, you know, at first I thought, well, gosh, how can they sell out for votes? I mean, how can anybody abandon your principles for the sake of votes? I mean, do principles not matter at all to these people? And then it occurred to me that, well, from their perspective, Kennedy's message is really not much different from Vivek Ramaswamy or the standard message that this party's been putting out for 20 years. So, I mean, look, Social Security and Medicare, Kennedy's firm believers in these programs. He's a Democrat, okay? He praises Franklin Roosevelt, the guy who brought in Social Security. He favors public schooling. Okay, that's part of the message we've been putting out for 20 years. He favors immigration controls. He wants to seal the border, just like Trump and some people in this party do. So from their perspective, they're saying, my gosh, Jacob, he will be able to present the libertarian message better than anybody else in the party, because in their minds, what he's saying is libertarian, okay? Which is really not much different from what Trump is saying. Trump's a big supporter of Social Security, Medicare, public schooling, regulatory reform, immigration controls. Same thing. If there's not a better proof of what's happened to this party in terms of losing its way, it's this support. First for the Republican side, recruiting those Republicans, yearning for DeSantis and Ramaswamy to come in and save us, to all of a sudden moving over to the left and fantasizing about Bobby Kennedy Jr. coming in and saving us. What better proof? I mean, if you look around, it's not difficult to see that this is what happens to a party that loses its way, that has no commitment to its own founding principles, that think its founding principles are an albatross, a liability, and so feels that they have to adopt Republican positions. And the whole idea is to target Republicans for votes. That's been the whole idea for 20 years. That's what they mean when they say this is the party of Ron Paul. You hear that in the party hierarchy and among my opponents for this nomination. This is the party of Ron Paul. We got to get those Ron Paul voters. We got to get those Ron Paul voters. Never going to happen. Those Ron Paul voters are Republicans. We have to find our own voters that love our message. And the message we're putting out, there are no voters out there who love this message. Oh, it's popular in the Republican Party. Vouchers, Social Security reform, Medicare reform, immigration controls, very popular in the Republican Party. But there's no constituency outside the Republican Party that wants to vote for Libertarian on that message of Republican light or Democrat light. There's just no constituency. That's why we're at 0%. That's why we got 1% 3 years ago. There's not a large group of people that want to vote for this message. You know who's figured this out and done the soul searching? And this is what they should have done in the reset regime. When they saw donations falling, they should have said, we need to do some soul searching here. When you see that the public opinion polls for the presidential race have us down at 0, I've been saying to this convention after convention, that's the time to do some soul searching, okay? And but you know who's done it is Justin Amash. Amash is a smart guy, and he's clearly did some soul searching. He comes into the Libertarian Party from the Republican Party through this revolving door that's been established between the two parties, and he comes in with the perfect reform message, okay? He favors Social Security reform, healthcare reform, keep Medicare and Medicaid intact, but reform the system, school vouchers, improve the public school system, regulatory reform, immigration reform, monetary reform, reform, okay? If anybody epitomizes this message that has come to characterize the party, it's Justin. And he does it very competently, very eloquently. But he comes into the party, very prominent member of the party, gets a featured spot at the Reno convention. Now he's going to run for U.S. Senate. But guess what he's doing? He's going back through the revolving door, back to the Republican Party to run. Why? Why? He's got a vicious primary campaign that he's got to run against like 8 or 9 opponents that are going to attack him viciously. Number one, because he voted to impeach Trump. And they haven't forgotten that. I'll guarantee you that. And darn sure Trump hasn't forgotten. Trump's going to go after Amash with a vengeance. And number two, they're going to say he's a traitor for having joined the Libertarian Party. And now he's coming back, to run as a Republican. So why is he doing this? He could have stayed in the Libertarian Party, which I assume he's still a member, he could have gotten the Libertarian Party nomination on a silver platter, which means he would go into the general election in November with an L next to his name rather than an R. Why didn't he do that? Because he's figured it out, just like I figured it out. There's no constituency for his message as a libertarian. He goes into the general election with an L, he's going to get 0 to 1%, maybe 2% at the most. But if he's got an R next to a name, he can win he can win the election. If he wins the nomination, he can win the election. He's figured that out. And that's where the soul searching comes in. That's what the Reno reset regime should have figured out. Instead of continuing on with this 20-year-old message of Republican light, serfdom reform, and libertarian socialism, they should have said, let's do some soul searching here and restore the libertarian brand. The principles that I've been enunciating in this campaign. Now, here's what I say we need to do. We need to get our own house in order. okay? By restoring the principles on which this party was founded. We need to reject Republican light, serfdom reform, and libertarian socialism entirely, and restore the founding principle of this party. This means open borders, dismantle Social Security, Medicare, and the welfare state immediately. Make that case. Reject school vouchers and public schooling. Make the case, the competent case for the separation of school and state. And also the separation of health care in the state. Abolish Medicare and Medicaid. And the separation of education in the state, school and state, money in the state, and also economy in the state. Just get the government out of these through constitutional amendments like we did with the First Amendment. Make that case to the American people. And dismantle the national security state. Bring all the troops home. Discharge them. Dismantle the empire military bases. End foreign interventionism. Okay, make that case to the American people. Now, would this message garner votes? I have no doubts. But you see, what's most important, though, is that our job in this party is to lead America to freedom. That's what we're here for. Democrats and Republicans are not going to lead America to freedom. You don't lead America to freedom with statism. And you don't lead America to freedom by copying Republicans and following Republicans or Democrats or supporting them or making them your nominee. You lead America to freedom by restoring your own house, by restoring your brand. And once you get everything in order here and you run a presidential campaign on this basis as who we are, as libertarians with our principles, now all of a sudden you start to break into the polls. Why? Because now you're not appealing to the Republican soccer mom or the well-to-do business person or whatever. They're never going to go with the radical message of libertarianism. They're too comfortable. But you go after migrant families, millions of migrant families across here that are horrified by what's going on the border. That's a lot of votes. Those are our voters. Those are my voters. They'll never vote for my opponents because they support immigration controls. We go after blacks. I mean, by focusing on the racist aspects of the war on drugs. This is the most racist government program since segregation, and every black knows it. We need to make that case. And then people who don't vote. There's 50% of people who don't vote, but they're never going to vote for a libertarian reformer. If they would have, we wouldn't have gotten 1% 3 years ago. We wouldn't be at 0%. They're only going to vote for somebody who's going to dismantle this thing, okay? The welfare state and the warfare state. And then they will register to vote and say, now I got somebody worth voting for. And then the fourth group is people that are getting squeezed by inflation, the people at the bottom of the economic ladder, the people that are going from paycheck to paycheck. Those are our voters, not by making some convoluted case for paper money, monetary reform, which my opponents favor, but the separation of money in the state. Show them how this brings sound money where they don't have to worry about inflation anymore. And so when you get these four groups of voters you're targeting with who we are as libertarians, all of a sudden you start creeping into the polls because that's a large number of people in every one of those groups. So you're creeping up 4 to 5%, and now all of a sudden you're getting people's attention. And then the money starts coming in, and then the new members start coming in, and the support starts coming in. But it's coming in for the right reason, not through trickery, not through manipulation, but because people are saying this is a party of principle. This is a party I want to be involved in. And that's why I joined the Libertarian Party some 30 years ago. Was I wanted to be part of a party that adhered to principle. I didn't care what their votes totals were, and I didn't even ask. You know, I was invited to serve on the platform committee, and I said, at first I was reluctant. I thought, well, this is a political party. It's watering down its message. It's adopting principles from the Republican Party. And I read the party platform, which was much more hardcore back in 1990. And I said, man, I want to be part of this party. And it was an honor to serve on the platform committee 3 times. But that's what we got to do. You know, I've said at convention that 20 years ago, I ran for U.S. Senate in Virginia on this set of principles. And I was running against John Warner, one of the most popular governors in the history of the state. He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He had been married to the famous actress Elizabeth Taylor. This was right after the 9/11 attacks. I was saying that those attacks were motivated by U.S. foreign policy, which is the same thing Ron Paul would say several years later in that famous debate with Giuliani and the others. And I knew I wouldn't get one Republican vote, and I didn't care. I wasn't targeting the Republican Party. I think that's a fool's errand to be targeting Republicans. And it has been for the last 20 years. And then The Democrats weren't running anybody. They knew they couldn't win, but I knew I wouldn't get their votes. I was calling for the immediate repeal of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schooling, open borders. No Democrat was going to vote for me, and I didn't care. I took this message to the electorate. Now, I did heavy campaigning, guerrilla warfare. I had no money, but I found out where blacks were having their concerts. I went in there and passing out my card, and I went into Hispanic neighborhoods, and I said, spread the word. There's a Senate candidate that's calling for open borders. I ended up with 7% of the statewide vote. This is 20 years ago. 7, not 0.07, 7%. And one of the biggest honors of my whole life was that I went in and made an appointment with a man named John O. Peterson, who was the pastor at the Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. He didn't know me from Adam, but he agreed to meet with me. And I went in there and I said, Pastor Peterson, this is what I stand for. Open the borders. What we're doing there to people and have been for 80 years is horrific, especially in terms of the message, the second greatest commandment that our Lord Jesus Christ enunciated. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And I want to get rid of these social welfare programs, including Social Security and Medicare, immediately. They've created a mindset of hopeless dependency among people. People will not be dying in the streets. This is where faith in God and faith in freedom and faith in others comes into play. The war on drugs, the most racist government programs and segregation. Every black in America knows this. They all know who Michelle Alexander is. I'd say 5% of whites know who Michelle Alexander is. And then bring all the troops home. What happened in Vietnam is a nightmare. Muhammad Ali was right. Martin Luther King was right. Imagine conscripting blacks to go die for freedom, to come back to a society that supposedly they're fighting for freedom, that's segregated. Well, at the end of this conversation, he says, Mr. Hornberger, I'm going to endorse your candidacy. And he wrote out a letter of endorsement, and he typed it out, and he says, take this to every black minister in the state, and you tell him I'm endorsing you. And he later got elected to the African American Hall of Fame, and I took that letter, and I have no doubts that the lion's share of my votes came from Virginia blacks. And so that's what I'm saying, is it's possible to achieve this major breakout with our principles. We don't need to copy Republicans. We don't need to copy Democrats. We don't need these people to come in and save us. We can restore the vitality of this party, including donations, getting out of these financial straits, by restoring the principles of our party, by putting our own house in order. We don't have to do it through trickery or manipulation. I fully understand the consequences of my decision not to engage in this contest. I will not be in that presidential debate. But you know what? By the end of this thing, I will have been in, I think, 21 debates. And it's pretty much a repetitive process. And my feeling is that I'm trying to get this party to move in a totally different direction, and which is a tough task. This is not, I'm swimming against the tide. I am not naive about what I'm up against. But the way I figure it, I've been putting out packets and written material at every convention, trying to get people to think and go home and think about what's going on in this party and do the soul searching that's necessary to change directions. And that's what we need to do. We can go in with the 0%, okay, which I don't think is going to change. And because if it hasn't changed over the last 3 years, it's gotten worse. We need to change directions completely and dramatically. But I figure that if I have not convinced at least 50% plus one of the delegates by this time, one more debate is not going to make that much of a difference. But if it does, so be it. I'll stick with my decision. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.